Hey everybody, we're filming up in the office today, and we're going to be talking about David Wood, Peter Boghossian, Greg Koukl, and Eric Hernandez. And they have one thing in common, and it's the way that they choose to address arguments and ask questions. Now, they all apply it in a different manner, but it all descends from one philosophical source. So you have David Wood, I'm sure you know who that is. He's a Christian apologist who specifically addresses Islam. Peter Boghossian is famous for writing a manual for creating atheists in street epistemology and some other things. Greg Koukl's titular work is called Tactics. If you haven't read it, it's a must-read as a Christian. And a relatively new person on the scene is Eric Hernandez, who is... Eric was helped by Greg Koukl, so there's a lot of kind of systems that are the same between his method and Greg Koukl, but nonetheless it has its own unique vibe to it. But all these are open-ended questions that are meant to force the individual you're talking to kind of think about why they believe what they believe. Most people, whenever they're out and they're going with an ideology or an understanding or a belief, they don't really know why they believe that. They just, do that. There's an old story of, I think it's like a family, and they would cook a ham and they would lop a part of the ham off and they would put it in the oven and cook it. And then like the kid or something says, well, why do we do it that way? Well, that's the way my mom did it. Right. So they go in, they talk to grandma, and it's like, well, that's the way my mom did it. Right. So then they make it all the way to great grandma, and great grandma says, well, the reason why I did that was because the oven I had was small and the whole ham wouldn't fit in there. Right. People do things without asking why we do them or why we believe them. They just kind of pick up and go. If you've ever seen anybody in your family, that kind of just goes and does, like, I only shoot this gun, drive this truck, drink this beer, whatever, they may have never stopped to ask why. It could just be, this is what I do. So we, as people, need to not do that. And there was a guy a long time ago who said, hey, not knowing why you do what you do, not the greatest thing. And that guy was Socrates. Yeah. So if you go back to the root of philosophy, pre-Plato, pre-Aristotle, you're going to find Socrates and a couple other people around who Socrates interacted with, or some other people who predate Socrates. They're called the pre-Socratics. But Socrates had a series of dialogues, and he had a type of argumentation method that he used predominantly throughout those dialogues. Now, there is a debate. The dialogues were recorded by Plato or manufactured by Plato. So some people say it's not actually Socrates' words. It's actually Plato's words. We're not going to get into any of that. We honestly don't care for what we need. What we need to understand is the way in which the man was presented, asking questions and having conversations with people. All right, so let's fast forward back to where we are now. Whenever we look at somebody like Peter Boghossian or Greg Koukl, which are kind of going to be the bookends of the two sides, you got atheism over here, you got Christianity over here. It's a lot of, what do you mean by that? How'd you come to that conclusion? Why do you hold that belief so strongly? Or what would it cause for you to change your belief? Or if somebody else said something, how would that adjust your opinion on belief, right? It's all just kind of open-ended questions to get people to kind of wrap their brain around their own opinions. So where I got into this is David Wood. I'm sure you've watched a ton of stuff from David Wood. We all have. He was doing different forms of Islamic polemics, and like me, you probably didn't know what the term polemics meant. You're just like, it's a type of apologetics, and you go after Islam. Cool. Islam's a thing. Got to take it on, right? And what he was doing with the satanic verses argument, with the Islamic dilemma and some of the other things, is specifically targeting worldview, aka polemics, and some of those bear this Socratic lineage. Well, he recommended a book called Tactics from Greg Koukl. Picked it up, read it. It's called the Columbo Tactic. I kind of alluded to some of the questions earlier. How'd you come to that conclusion? What do you mean by that? Asking people to explain themselves or to explain definitions. And the bookend to the other side of this, as I said a minute ago, is a manual for creating atheists by Peter Boghossian. He uses the same thing. There's a thing about scales where you are on belief and disbelief, but it's basically just talking about the Socratic Method and how to apply it in a conversation to remove the faith virus, as he says. The books are really different. Greg Koukl's book gets right into the meat of it, like you are learning how to do this tactic. Peter Boghossian's book is different. It's a lot slower. And you may say like, oh, a Christian doesn't like an atheist book. No, it's not that. You got to go through like a third of the book before you get to the first real kind of chunk of meat teaching you how to do the Socratic Method. Boghossian's very upfront that this is the Socratic Method, where Koukl never talks about Socrates. So they're very different books, but they teach the same principles. So what I did a long time ago, whenever I was trying to, get my chops as a wannabe apologist, is I went to Reddit and I started using this and debating different atheist people and whatever. And doing things like, how'd you come to that conclusion? What do you mean by that? Why do you hold that so strongly? All those other questions from earlier, what would cause you not to hold this belief so strongly? And people got pissed. They didn't like me asking these questions, not because they were atheist or not because they couldn't formulate a defense for why they believe what they believe, but it was just very robotic. And as you go through and you're studying more and more into these books and the how-tos, it's a little bit of a pitfall to kind of stop early in the books and just start going. Don't do that. Even Socrates, as you kind of study some of his works, tells you that there is a level of nuance and kindness, and you're never, ever in a situation where you want some type of antagonism between you and the other person. You always want to be like two friends kind of talking through something. We're searching for meaning together. We're trying to accomplish something together. Now, from there, I wasn't really great with the Socratic Method, that I didn't really understand that this was challenging someone's worldview and all that. I ran into Eric Hernandez and went through his book. It's called A Lazy Approach to Evangelism. It's more semantic than the other approaches of the Socratic Method. Like, I prefer hamburgers over hot dogs. Well, why do you prefer hamburgers over the hot dogs? Actually, let me ask that differently. What's the difference between a hamburger and a hot dog? And the person explains the difference. And let's say they say, a hot dog is a tubular piece of meat between a bun that's connected in the middle. And Eric Hernandez says, well, if I roll up a piece of ham into a tube and put it between a single piece of white bread that I've kind of mushed down a little bit in the middle and folded up, is that a hot dog? And obviously the answer is no, but it's meant to cause somebody to kind of think about their definitions, right? And what that's called is diastolic and systolic adjustment of a definition. Diastolic, we're contracting the definition to get a more kind of dialed in understanding, and systolic, we're expanding the definition to be more encompassing. If you ever get a chance to read any of the dialogues, you'll see this, in print. Eric's book is great. It's similar to Koukl's, and you read this and you can kind of go out and start applying this immediately. I haven't finished it yet. I'm a crazy slow reader and there's a bunch of other stuff to read, but what I've gone through so far, I've really enjoyed. Anyways, the moral of this video is not so much to teach the Socratic Method, but to tell you that this is the root where we as wannabe Christian polemicists, or people who are learning to be Christian polemicists, kind of need to stop and go back and learn the Socratic Method, because so much of the modern kind of polemical teaching is built on this. And it's foundational for kind of really unlocking tactics or unlocking Peter Boghossian's work and applying it in your own evangelistic efforts. I haven't gone back and done more of Eric's stuff since I've been studying the Socratic Method, but I plan to, because there were things that I didn't get whenever I was doing Greg Koukl stuff or Eric stuff or Boghossian stuff, that now as I've stopped, studied the Socratic Method, and then I'm coming back to Boghossian and Koukl, I'm like, oh, wow, that's how this makes sense. That's why this works. So if you're anything like me and you want to understand this polemical questioning way to address another person's worldview, stop what you're doing, put down your other books that are about open-ended questioning formats for how to do evangelism, go to the internet, look up the Socratic Method, and kind of just spend a little bit of time studying that and figuring it out. There's a book I would recommend. I'll flash it up here on the screen. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's a good read. I personally haven't finished it yet, but I would recommend it as a good primer to understand the Socratic Method. There's a ton of stuff on YouTube about Socrates' dialogues. Gorgias is kind of the famous one. If you get a chance, Peter Croft has a video on it. It's not the best, but Peter Croft is a really good philosopher, and he's a Christian, so I would recommend him. But go check it out and do me a solid. Comment what you think about the Socratic Method, or if you've gone through and already kind of looked up and started, chewing through it and trying to figure out where you maybe missed some things that now make sense in the Tactics book or anybody else's evangelism book. Comment how studying the Socratic Method helps you click with an evangelism method better.